What's going on, folks? Vulkan here. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're talking about some of the best tips and tricks that I've learned while playing the game, or that seasoned veterans have taught me to help make my life easier in Tower of Fantasy. Now, this is a longer video, so I split everything up into chapters below, so please feel free to skip around and find the stuff that you actually want to see. So quick disclaimer before we get into this. The footage here that you're seeing was taken from a closed test client. So basically there might be some things that differ visually from the global release. However, the information should still be correct. So anyway, let's get things started with some general stuff. So first up, make sure to take advantage of all of the awesome online resources that people have put together. There are some fantastic people out there, and they have just been sweating, put so much effort into getting Tower of Fantasy stuff put together, like the interactive maps that you can find, toweroffantasy.info, which has tons of good information to help get you started. Those links are in the description below, so please feel free to go check those out. And speaking of the interactive map, I want to talk about that first. So in Tower of Fantasy, there are tons and tons of things to collect on the map. You have nuclei, which are used to summon weapons. You have upgrade materials that you need to use to upgrade all of your stuff. You have cooking resources and just so much more packed into each zone. Now, as you collect certain things like supply pods, space rifts, scenic points, and you go and you clear ruins, you're going to earn rewards. Now, one of these rewards is a special mushroom that gives you more endurance and helps make exploring much easier. So you want to get these fast because it gives you a lot more endurance or stamina. That way you can climb higher, you can swim further, all of that fun stuff. So what you want to do is you want to log into the map, the one I've linked in the description below. And once you do that, you can mark off each item that you find. Now this is critical, and I know it can be annoying, it can be time consuming, but please do it. You're going to thank yourself later, because let me tell you guys, if you miss one of these, you could spend hours looking for the one you missed. I know, because I did it. I was almost done. I had almost all of the supply pods. I was missing one, and I had to go check every single one out there to see if it was the one that I missed. And eventually I found it, and it did take me a few hours. So please learn from my mistake and go out there and mark these things individually. It doesn't cost anything to sign up. It's literally just signing in. So anyway, get a route down, hit up all of the nucleus, the pods, and the scenic points. Now, one other thing to take into consideration, this game does lock some of these for a certain duration after you enter the game. So for instance, avoid like the western border of Astra for the first 9 hours. Those things are going to unlock later on, and at that point you'll be able to go back and actually get them. You'll know if it's locked because the supply pod will have a big kind of ring around it, and there's a giant clock above it that's counting down the time. So that's the general stuff. Next, I want to talk about exploration. So whenever you climb, swim, or jetpack, you're going to consume endurance. Now remember, this is what we talked about earlier, which is another term for stamina. So at the beginning, you're not going to have a ton of endurance, and because of that, things might seem out of reach. But there are some ways you can get around that. So for starters, let's talk about using your endurance. One, don't burst through it, right? What I mean by that is don't jump while you're climbing, don't sprint while you're swimming. Sure, I mean, you're going to move faster, right? You're going to kind of burst forward, but you're not going to travel as far when everything is said and done. If you just move normally, you're going to get more value per endurance consumed, and you'll end up traveling a much further distance. Here you can see an example where I burst a few times and I'm instantly out of gas. Here I just swim regularly and I go so much further. So unless you're either climbing or swimming a very short distance, just take it slow, because you'll end up going the distance. Now, when you're climbing, there's a movement trick you can use to avoid consuming endurance at all. So if you're on PC, what you want to do is press Control, you'll let go of the wall, then you want to double jump, and then press W to grab the wall again. Now, if you do this correctly, you're going to travel upwards without using much endurance at all. And this is a great way to reach new heights without that endurance mushroom early on. So be sure to take advantage of these movement tricks. Now, alternatively, let's say you're up pretty high and you run out of endurance, right? This could be, you know, you're jetpacking around, or maybe you're climbing and you just, you have to let go. Well, if you heavy attack, you can avoid all fall damage. This has saved me a ton of time. It's just a helpful thing to know. So if you ever get to a point where you need to just drop, go ahead, deactivate your jetpack or whatever you want to do, use your heavy attack, and you will plummet to the earth, you'll slam into the ground, and you will not take any fall damage, which is just great. So another thing is, while you're out exploring, keep an eye out for breakable objects. These look like cracked rocks, thorny vines covering supply pods, or kerosene plants that you can light on fire. Now, all of these can be destroyed to find rewards. You can use fire to clear out thorns, tar pits, and kerosene plants. You can use frost to ice out these little volcanoes, or you can use frost to freeze water so you can stand on it. You can use your missile barrage relic to destroy large cracked rocks, revealing like caverns and caves behind them. So there are multiple uses for just about everything. So if you find something that kind of looks suspicious, try a few relics and weapons to see if anything happens, because honestly, something might. Now, another thing to keep an eye out for are iron chests and password chests. So you might think to yourself, well, the rewards really aren't crazy good, right? They're not something that is worth my time, so I'll just skip it for now. Please don't do that. These chests are a steady source of experience, and once you reach level 30, things start to slow down quite a bit. So picking these up might seem minuscule, but they do add up over time. Now, another thing to watch out for are containers or machines with green lights on them. Now, this could be a locker, a vending machine, or something that looks like a generator or a large speaker. The thing is, most of these can be searched, and while sometimes they don't contain anything at all, other times they have rare materials you can use to upgrade things, and this is a good source of that. And the thing is, these reset daily, so make sure to go back and check regularly. That way you can see if you can score some epic upgrade materials. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in terms of exploration is the Unstuck tool. Now, this is hidden away in the settings menu, but it's really nice and it's useful because it allows you to escape if you can't move. I used this a couple times because I accidentally super bounced behind a pillar in a ruin. It reminded me of my Halo 2 days. I was running, I jumped on this rock, and I don't know what happened, but just like in Halo, I super bounced and shot way up to like the ceiling in the ruins, and I fell down behind this big giant rock. I had no way out, so I had to use Unstuck. It saved me, and I was able to finish and claim my rewards. But that's something out there that I really want people to know about, because again, if you get stuck and you can't teleport or transmit out, Unstuck is what you need to use. So that wraps up exploration. Next, we're gonna talk about combat. So in Tower of Fantasy, combat has multiple layers. You have basic attacks, discharge attacks, aerial attacks, you have skills, you have dodges, and then you have passives that affects all of those. So there's a lot going on. And if you want a high overview of how all of that works, you can check out my starter guide. But for now, we're gonna cover some tips to help improve your combat effectiveness. So to start, choosing your weapon is going to decide a few things for you. And it needs to have a little bit more thought put into it than just clicking on one, right? One is going to decide your damage elements, which are fire, frost, volt, electricity, and then physical. And they're going to decide what resonance that you currently have depending on how many tank, DPS, and healing weapons you're using. So resonance is something that gives you buffs for both solo and team play, and it comes in 4 flavors. So if you have a balanced resonance, that's going to require one of each type of weapon. So it means you have your 3 weapons equipped, you have 1 DPS, 1 healing, 1 tank. This is going to increase your final damage, your damage reduction, your shatter, and your healing. So it's going to give you a balanced approach to the game. Then you have Fortitude, which requires 2 tank weapons. This is going to increase your damage reduction, your shatter, and greatly increase your aggro. So if you're someone who's looking into tanking, make sure to stack up Fortitude, because that's what you're going to need. Then we have Attack, which is what most people are probably going to use right out of the gate. This requires 2 DPS weapons, and this just flat out increases your damage. Then the counterpart to Attack is Benediction, which is basically healing. This is going to require 2 support weapons, and this increases your healing output. So just make sure to keep an eye on this. Choose the resonant that means the most to you. Now, this isn't every single resonance in the game, because there are also certain weapons that'll give you special resonance if that criteria is met. So for instance, there's an SSR that gives frost resonance if you have 2 frost weapons, and that increases your frost attack. So building around these is going to help both your damage and survivability, and it needs to be something that you put a little bit of thought into. So that's weapon resonance. Now I want to talk about some actual combat tips. So first up, aerial attacks tend to do more damage overall. This is because there is a risk and reward associated with these. So while aerial attacks will do more damage, they also leave you more vulnerable to incoming damage. So make sure to take advantage of these when you can, but don't push it to the limit where you're sitting there getting just absolutely rocked and you end up with no health because you keep trying to push aerial attacks. So just something to keep in mind. Now, second, each weapon does have its own set of attack combos for you to master. So while you can just spam left click the entire time, that might get the job done early on, you can become much more proficient by learning how to chain different combos together to perform special attacks. So for instance, here's an example of a combo sheet. You can see the different light and heavy attacks, the triggers, the basic controls, how it kind of works together with dodge. There's a lot that goes into this, and it really is deeper than it originally lets on. So to build on that, different weapons also have different dodge attacks too. Not every dodge is built the same. Some are very basic and just trigger Fantasia, which is that time slow mechanic. Others trigger special effects or attacks to deal huge amounts of damage or provide some form of utility. So understanding everything your weapons can do is critical to maximizing their effectiveness. Next up comes shields. So these are super important to respect. If you don't, you're going to be spending a lot more time wailing on an enemy than you need to. So each weapon does have a shatter stat. This is how effective they are at shattering shields. But shields themselves also have strengths and weaknesses. So for instance, the non-elemental shield, which is white, has no resistance and you can use whatever you want to shatter it. However, purple shields are volt shields, which have a very high resistance to volt attacks. So you need to make sure to use anything other than volt to shatter it more quickly. The same thing goes for frost shields, fire shields, etc. So make sure to pick the right weapon for the right job, because when you go in to fight bosses and you don't shatter the shield that they put up, they're going to be able to do an ultimate attack that could be super lethal for you and your team. One last thing to keep in mind is also elemental weaknesses. So enemies are going to have certain weaknesses and strengths towards elements. So for instance, hyenas are going to take more damage from Volt, while machines will take more damage from Frost. Machines also have a higher resistance to physical, so don't use physical weapons against them. So really you just need to keep a well-rounded set of weapons and relics to help exploit these when you can. So the last thing I want to talk about for combat is a shortcut, a hotkey that I really like and I didn't know about for a long period of time, but this allows you to easily swap between relics. And you're going to be swapping between relics super often. It can feel like a chore sometimes because you constantly have to click into the menu, click to deploy, and then click on an actual relic. And it takes quite a bit of time. So luckily, Tower of Fantasy lets you set up multiple relic combinations, and then you can swap between them just by using G, which is great because this lets you set up an exploration set, a damage set, a control set, and then you can swap between them without needing to enter the menu. You still can't swap them in the middle of combat, but you can definitely swap them before. So with combat out of the way, let's talk about upgrading weapons because, guys, there is a preferred way to do this and a way that'll end up wasting a lot of resources. So weapons in Tower of Fantasy are the gacha mechanic, right? You need to summon them in order to unlock and use them. Now, over time, you will need to upgrade weapons to increase their strength and effectiveness to keep up with the game. This is where the tip comes in. Just pick one or two weapons to truly invest your resources into first. You will have enough materials to keep them maxed out and at the top of their game, which helps a lot with content and bosses. But if you choose to spread these materials across multiple weapons, you're going to run out, and at that point, things are going to slow way down for you. So pick one or two that you like and they're going to be useful. I would recommend at least one of them be a fire weapon, and then funnel resources into those first, and then the third weapon last. Now, side note, this also goes for gear. Prioritize your strongest pieces first and then work around to your weaker ones. Now, the nice thing about gear is that you can transfer those investments and upgrades to a new piece of gear. So those resources aren't lost, which again is just really nice. Now, weapons can also be advanced when you use duplicates, which essentially adds another star, and that unlocks more passives. And these passive bonuses are incredibly powerful. So you want to make sure to spend those fusion cores to unlock them. Sometimes it's not overly apparent that you can do that, but clicking into each weapon, clicking on advancement, you can check out, hey, do I have a fusion core? Yes or no? If yes, then go ahead and spend it. So keeping on with the theme of upgrades, next up is progression. So like combat, progression has many layers. You have weapons, gear, weapon matrix, your suppressor. Now all of these take different resources and there are some big traps you can fall into. So we already talked about weapons and gear, but we need to discuss weapon matrix and your suppressor. So weapon matrices are data chips that contain stats, but they also provide you with set bonuses to help round out your build. Each weapon can equip 4 of them, and the set bonus typically unlocks at 3 for the early chips, and then later chips will provide you a 4 set bonus. So here you want to make sure you choose a set that you really like, and the one that's going to benefit not just one weapon, but multiple, and then invest your resources into that set first. Now, once those are upgraded and you really want to beef up a few data chips for your 4th slot or maybe a secondary set, please feel free. But just like weapons, you do not want to run out of resources and leave yourself high and dry, especially with something that's going to give you set bonuses. So an example you can see here is the Echo chip. You get these from your suppressor upgrades. This gives a bonus to weapon charge on discharge attacks. It's incredibly versatile and it's flexible for an early set. Now, speaking of your suppressor, this is a huge source of base stats for your character. Here, you're going to need to reach certain milestones and have enough potent omnium crystals to upgrade. Now, each one gives you a huge stat boost, and then once you reach the end of a suppressor version, you unlock a new matrix and a new suppressor type. Now, there really isn't any tips or tricks here other than just don't forget to upgrade it because, again, it's a huge source of secondary and primary stats. Now, throughout the game, you're going to get boxes that contain upgrade materials. Most of the time, these are selection boxes, so you can pick the thing you need. Please listen to me. Do not open these until you need them. 100%. Do not open them until you actually need them. This is a huge mistake waiting to happen. I can see it happening to some players already. If you just open these boxes and then choose materials randomly, you're going to be creating so much extra work for yourself. Please just leave them in your inventory until you need to upgrade a weapon, see what you're missing, open the box to get that particular material, and then upgrade. It seems very simple, but I know that, once you get going, you're in the zone, you start clicking, you're, clicking stuff to open it up, you can miss some things. I know because I've been there. So please just don't open those. Now, the last thing is giving gifts to your characters. Now, this is a system that I feel like needs more attention, and honestly, there are some great perks in here if you invest into a single character. Now, as you give gifts, make sure to match up the gifts you have with the preferences for each character, so you earn more points per gift given. Now, these perks you can unlock range from damage dealing to exploration based. So again, there's something that's important, so don't forget about them because they're out there. So that's progression. Let's talk cooking next. So cooking in Tower of Fantasy is important. It really is. It gives you satiety. It keeps your health full. You can get some really cool buffs. So make sure to cook food that's beneficial to you, right? You don't want to eat a food that doesn't give you health when you actually need it. Now, I highly recommend crafting the dandelion mushroom soup at first. It gives strong health and satiety boosts, especially early on. It's available kind of right from the get-go. Also, just another thing, make sure to pick up everything. And I mean everything. There are ingredients everywhere, and picking these up will keep your pantry stocked and allow you to create new dishes. You can also create dishes that boost certain stats like I mentioned before, which will help with increasing your damage and clearing content. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is dailies and weeklies. Now, this really isn't a tip, it's really just a reminder. Make sure to do these things each day to maximize your progression and your leveling. Dailies should be done first thing. They don't take very long, so please just prioritize those because if you miss out on them, it could set you back quite a bit. Now, weeklies can be accessed through your adventure log, and they give you some really easy goals to reach each week for currency, materials, and other various things. So just to give some examples of the stuff that you need to be doing each day, your adventure journal has materials, experience, and upgrades. You need to go through and clear ruins, which are like dungeons. There's 4 bounties that you can go clear out. You can get things like nucleus as well as upgrade materials. You have a sign-in bonus that you can take advantage of. And then you have Mia's Kitchen. Mia's Kitchen is one that you want to make sure you do. It gives you a big buff. You can do it multiple times a day, and you get a lot of experience for it as well. Then on the other side, you have your crew, which again, it's very important to join a crew, which is like a clan or a guild, however you want to approach it. Your crew allows you to make daily donations. And then these donations give you crew points, which you can spend in a special store that has upgrade materials, special gifts, and things like that. Then you have Vitality. This is a special kind of stamina source that is used and consumed each time you do something in terms of content. So if you go do a piece of group content, you're going to consume vitality. If you go do some solo content, you're going to consume vitality. Now you can continue to go through and play these things, but once you're out of vitality, you will not be able to get rewards for what you're doing. So your natural first thought might be, well, we need to save some. Well, yes and no. So as you spend vitality, you're going to unlock achievements, and you're also going to push through some of the launch events that'll then give you some really powerful rewards. So you want to make sure to use that vitality, or you're going to keep pushing back some of the rewards that you're going to get. Now, the last thing is training. So you want to make sure to complete your training every day. These are mini games that'll test your hand-eye coordination and all of that fun stuff, but you're going to earn points from doing these, and then you can spend those in a shop to, again, purchase upgrade materials. So folks, that wraps this one up. I hope that these tips and tricks were helpful for getting started in Tower of Fantasy. Now, I'm sure all of you are going to teach me quite a few things in the comments, and I'm super pumped to see what tips and tricks you all have. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I will talk to you guys next time.